This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with your host, Vicki Davis.
Hello, this is Vicki Davis, and today you're listening to a Classroom Spotlight on the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, where we're shining a light on the incredible stories of teachers and students with ideas to impact your classroom right now. Episode 873, 4 Essentials for Every Teacher. Today we're talking with Gretchen Bridgers. She is a 2-time National Board Certified elementary school teacher. Now she coaches teachers. She's been in education for 20 years, and she has written Always a Lesson, Teacher Essentials for Classroom and Career Success. And Gretchen, today we're going to talk about 4 essentials for every teacher. Where do we start?
Well, I think of these 4 elements like building a house. We're going to start with the foundation, and if we don't get that right, it doesn't matter what the other essentials we try and work on. So the first one is lesson design. And that's different than lesson planning. Lesson planning is a piece of paper. You fill in the box. Lesson design is like you're putting on a play from start to finish. This is a learning experience, and we have to think through all the nitty-gritty details. And so I talk about how to have value in a lesson, but also how to have it have meaning for kids. And when you can have those 2 things at the same time, the lesson really comes alive. We also discuss backwards planning and the essentials of starting with your standard and your objective and going to the end of the assessment. So alignment is there before picking the activities and making sure we're doing that consistently, because when we don't do these essentials consistently, that's where trouble crops up.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing that's real important is, yes, we all fill out those lesson plans and do those. But I know for me, and I'm finishing up year 22, is that even though I may have some stuff on paper, I'm always thinking, okay, where am I going to be when the kids come into the classroom? And I'm usually, at the door, unless I have some kind of interesting wow and I want to intrigue them and get them like gathered somewhere, right? But it's kind of like, for me, it's thinking through in my mind, how am I opening? How am I closing? What am I doing in addition to what I may have on paper? So this doesn't necessarily have to be written down, although it could, right?
Right. And I call these core moves because I think teachers feel overwhelmed that they have to have a 20-page lesson for everything. And I'm like, you're thinking about what environment you want to set up for your students as learners, and you can reuse those elements every time. But it does take intentional thought and planning to design it and then replicate it going forward. So put the time in up front, all the nitty-gritty details, and then we can rinse and repeat.
I'm not a fan of scripting or having to read a script. I mean, I'm not going to do it. But then I've seen some teachers lesson plan to the point that they're reading their own script. And you're kind of like, okay, we're missing the point here. Like, this is about an interaction in a relationship, and not just a relationship between us and our students, but a relationship with the content.
Right.
And isn't teaching so exciting, Gretchen?
I love teaching. And some teachers do need to script sections, like what are the questions you're going to ask? Or in your direct instruction, what are the points you cannot forget to say this? And then you rehearse it in the car, in the shower, with a best friend. But yes, when you're live in front of kids executing that lesson, be as present as possible. And so I always say, the more thoroughly you plan and you think through and maybe rehearse that a bit, then you don't have to do that live in front of kids because it's already in your brain, it's in your muscle memory, and you're ready to just deliver and respond to what's happening in front of you. And that's what makes a great teacher.
Absolutely. Okay. So now we're ready to go on classroom management, which this will make or break you literally.
Yeah. And I will tell you, lots of schools say, hey, Gretchen, come coach teachers on classroom management. And you know what I say? How's their planning? Because below classroom management is that planning piece. And if they go into a classroom and they're just putting out fires, which we think that's classroom management, but that's distracting and you lose time learning. So if we can put procedures in place in our planning phase and then deliver our lesson with those preventions, then you don't see me having to tell Johnny to sit down 7 times or don't throw the paper airplane or all the other distractions that are happening, because I've thought through those hot spots and I've put things in my lesson to prevent that from even occurring. And so you might come in a classroom of a fantastic teacher and think, I don't see them having to address any misbehaviors. And it's like,
yeah,
right. That's the point, is that it's invisible because so much time and thought was put into the protocols of how to run an efficient, productive classroom. And so it really takes, again, that thought of what could happen? What could I put in place? How about misunderstandings that could occur with my delivery? Because now, if I'm answering a question of a confused student, now someone over here who's not confused is now bored while waiting
Yeah.
for that student to clear that up. And so they're going to think of something else to do to occupy their brain. And so you've now thought through how to keep the lesson moving, but also how to help this person over here get caught up. And it's this balancing act. And the longer relationship you have with your students, the more you know some of their typical behaviors. And you can spot them early and you can add new systems. And it really has allowed classroom management to run smoothly.
And see, for me, I extend classroom management to my ever valuable substitute teacher. Some people, I've subbed for others and they leave me 10 minutes worth of work for a 53-minute period. And honestly, I'll pull out one of my lesson plans and teach, the day I did it about AI. And I'm not going to let kids sit there and have nothing to do, because nothing to do is really going to make a mess. And so classroom management, I tend to overplan for my subs,
Right.
not to put a lot of pressure on them, but I go ahead and train some students. Here are your students who are your on-point students who've been trained on this lesson. They're able to support the other kids. I've already, taken them aside and said, okay, guys, you're doing this lesson. And I have the kids, kind of own the classroom when I'm out. And there are times that subs will do a great job for me. I may not do a great job for somebody else. And because our classroom management extends to our substitute, now we can't always get the greatest hoot. Every so often, I've had a sub who's ignored my lesson plan. And when that happens, it's called get a new sub. But, honestly, if you plan well, people want to sub for you. I mean, people who sub for me are happy to come back and sub for me again. But then there's some people like, don't let me sub for them because they don't plan, So classroom management is us, but those procedures you put in place extend every day.
Yep. And I say that there's 3 R's to classroom management. And the first is relationships, because I made the mistake as a classroom teacher jumping right into content and into this is business. And the kids were like, what is going on? And so when you take time to build a family, a classroom family, now they're more receptive to whatever the rules or parameters are, because they feel respected, valued, seen, heard, all the things. R number 2 is now you hit them with the routines and you reuse these routines. So yes, it takes time to think of how you want things done, but then continue to use them and tweak them as necessary. But the third piece is rope them in. If your lesson is boring and dry, you are going to lose them and your classroom management will fall apart. So relationships, routines, rope them in.
Love it. These are great things. Okay, so we have lesson design and classroom management, and those are just so important, but there's more. What's next?
Yes. Okay, so now we move into the fun stuff of student engagement. And this is where teachers want to hang out. This is why they're on Pinterest and Instagram. Like, give me all the fun things to do. But it goes back to planning with that alignment. Does this align to the skills we're trying to teach? And does this activity do it better than I could do it myself? Especially talking about technology these days. We can't just pick a technology tool and think, okay, get a check on my observation for using tech. Does it enhance the lesson? Does it drive student understanding? And so when it comes to engagement, students have to engage with the content. They have to engage with me, the teacher, and they have to engage with each other. Students love to talk. Some of their understanding and processing comes from talking. And so we have to build that in as part of the engagement, that you're engaging with the text in front of you and you have time to question, answer with the teacher, but you also are able to relay key points to your peer. And that helps the whole process of the lesson sink in. And engagement can be fun, but it has to be, aligned and rigorous in a way that this helps you better understand what we're doing. And it takes a lot of prep. And so when teachers are in planning, instead of filling in the plan and then passing it to the next person to fill in the next plan, this is where we talk. This is what we hash it out. What does this look like? How can we do it better? What questions are we asking? What ideal answer are we hoping to hear? How are students going to be paired up? What's the pacing? What's the goal of this activity? What's the student outcome, or what are they producing? Getting really granular with that stuff And that's how we get better at it, the dialogue between the teachers and throwing those ideas around. And it comes back to their behavior. Are they engaged with behavior? Cognitively, are they engaged? Emotionally, are they engaged? And this takes a while. So teachers may hang out
Yes.
and miss brick for a while until they really gain confidence and competence.
And, as you talk about all this, some people see cooperative learning as a nice to, but it's a have to. I just finished a great book by Adam Grant called Hidden Potential. And in there, he really goes into something called collective intelligence. If you have one ox, it can pull 5,000 pounds. If you have two, it can pull 15,000 pounds,
That's
right?
right.
And, but collective intelligence happens when kids know how to work in groups and engage in pro-social behavior. And you have to be careful about narcissistic behavior because narcissism kills group productivity. It does. And so to me, even as we're teaching personal intelligence, knowing how to be on a team and having that collective intelligence, I think, is really not been talked about enough,
Yeah.
And that is part of what you're talking about. That is part of student engagement, because I love that you say engaging with content, engaging with teachers, but engaging with each other. Okay,
Yes.
that's collective intelligence. Like, we've got to get better at understanding and valuing that, because I believe for way too long, we've let some of our, quote, top students feel like they can just go it alone all the way through school. And they're just missing out on the way the world works,
And this is why that classroom management underneath it is so important, because now when we release them to be with each other, there needs to be a lot of protocols in place so they know
Mm-hmm.
how to engage appropriately and at a deep enough level that it's not just surface conversation, that they can really push each other's thinking and enhance ideas like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
Again, there's a reason for this sequence. And if a teacher's like, I just want to do the fun stuff and do engagement, well, the levels below it are falling apart. I call it Swiss cheese holes. You got to go back in and fill those holes in and figure
Yeah.
out why it's not as firm as it could be.
Well, and I had a student yesterday. We're finishing up our app building projects. And as we're recording this, we have our Shark Tank, is what we call it, today. And one of the students came to me and said, what do I do? I have a teammate who says she doesn't feel like part of the team, but she has been working like part of the team, but she doesn't feel like it. What do I do? And see, when you start getting to how people feel, like, that's coaching on such a deeper level that's so important. Okay, now you have your fourth one. Let's go ahead and get to that.
Now, this is where some folks may never reach, and that's okay. It's student ownership and choice, meaning this is like self-run classroom. And that's only when the engagement has gone so well that you're now able to facilitate. You no longer have to be leading everything and popping in and out and redirecting, that they are ready to go from taking attendance and running G to greeting folks at the door to recapping a lesson with its main points to self-run book clubs. I mean, it can run the gamut. And this allows teachers to step back and say, you have earned the independence to run this classroom and enhance it in a way that I cannot. You are ready to do this, and I have created a space that allows you to do it. And it's all about equity and access. That even though someone can engage at a really deep level, someone else who's not quite there can still have choice and ownership and might just look a little different. And so this is a little challenging because they are, a lot is happening and it's all independent. And the students are able to do it once they've mastered everything that comes below it. And I always say, start small, start giving away some of these administrative tasks around the room, help them build confidence and feeling like, wow, this is really my home base. And I love to show up for work today. And then you could start handing over content stuff where they're able to lead the class and become their own experts. And that's where they come alive and say, I love learning. I feel successful. I feel smart. And I'm excited to show up and work with my peers today.
Love this. Gretchen Bridgers, Always a Lesson, Teacher Essentials for Classroom and Career Success. And the book is out. And these 4 tiers are excellent. I love the way that you're thinking about it, and it really matches with what I know as a teacher also. So thanks for coming on the show, Gretchen.
I appreciate it so much, Vicki.
You've been listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. If you want more content from Vicki Davis, you can find her on Facebook, X.com, TikTok, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube at Cool Cat Teacher. Thank you for listening.